Hello, I'm Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent Makori in for #the U-Word. It's Thursday, December 16th. This is Africa 54.
Crisis in Ethiopia, the year in review. South Africa's High Court orders former President Jacob Zuma to return to jail. And nonprofits urge the addition of a deadly sub-Saharan disfiguring disease to the World Health Organization's list.
An international human rights group on Thursday accused separatist fighters in Cameroon's Anglophone regions of systematically targeting schools, students and teachers during a civil war that has killed thousands of people. The attacks have forced 2 out of every 3 schools in Cameroon's English-speaking regions to close, according to a Human Rights Watch report. In the far north of Cameroon, thousands are fleeing violence between farmers and herders. Saleh Abderamane was a farmer in Cameroon. He was bleeding from a machete wound to his head when his relatives ferried him across the river border to Chad. He is among thousands of refugees fleeing violence between farmers and herders. The 34-year-old was attacked during a fight over water disputes in the far north region. Such fighting has driven 48,000 people to seek refuge in Chad this month alone, according to authorities.
I
was seriously wounded on my back by machetes. I nearly died far out in the bush, but luckily my relatives found me and took me across the river. The conflict there has become very violent. I don't want to go back.
The refugees are staying in informal camps along the riverbank outside the capital. Lacking proper shelter, they sleep in the open air. Teary-eyed children line up in the midday sun for meals from the local Red Cross. Hamad Abdallah is a local governor.
The government will provide security and medical care for refugees in critical conditions. But for the others, we will need international and humanitarian organizations to mobilize so that everyone has access to the basic necessities. We must show solidarity with our Cameroonian brothers who have found refuge here.
Refugees, mostly women and children, are still trying to reach Chad, crossing rivers on rickety boats. Chad's Minister of Territorial Administration says their number has risen 60% in the past week, putting substantial pressure on local communities that were already facing food shortages. Well, our armed forces in the past year, Ethiopia has gone from a stable and prosperous anchor in the Horn of Africa to a country where fractious civil war and famine now loom as a real possibility. U.S. Maghreb Bashir takes a look back at major developments in Ethiopia this year.
Political tensions in Ethiopia boiled over in November 2020 between the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF. Tigray forces attacked a federal military base in their northern stronghold and tried to steal the army's weapons, saying they feared an offensive. Prime Minister Abiy struck back, launching what he said would be a quick military offensive against the rebels. But 13 months later, the fighting continues. The rebels have threatened to march on the capital, Addis Ababa, and a de facto government blockade has left more than 5 million people in Tigray in dire need of humanitarian assistance. The conflict has spread to the neighboring Amhara and Afar regions, leaving an additional 4.2 million people in need of aid.
What became clear quickly in the course of the conflict is that there's unlikely to be any definitive military solution. And this has been the case throughout the course of 2021, and I don't see that changing in the future.
The parties have ignored international calls to stop fighting and talk.
Our concern is for a ceasefire. That absolutely must happen. Humanitarian aid needs to reach all those that have suffered from this conflict, and we absolutely need to resolve these problems through political discussions and through dialogue.
The African Union has appointed former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo as a mediator. The United States has also tried to facilitate a settlement, sending Special Envoy Jeffrey Feltman to the country 3 times. Preconditions from both sides have prevented the start of talks.
The positions are very, very entrenched. The struggle is an existential one. But unless those types of shifts are made and those sorts of conciliatory approaches are taken, then it could lead to some absolutely terrible outcomes.
The UN fears this country of more than 110 million people is on a disastrous trajectory.
What is certain is that the risk of Ethiopia descending into a widening civil war is only too real. That would bring about a humanitarian catastrophe and consume the future of such an important country.
While the North suffers from conflict, much of the country and the Horn of Africa region in general is struggling from years of recurring drought. Nearly 26 million people across Ethiopia need humanitarian assistance.
I think next year is going to be a year of drought, of famine, of the collision of climate and crisis that we have not seen these many years.
The convergence of crises makes it all the more imperative to find a peaceful settlement to the Tigray conflict.
I don't think that the world has a choice but to continue urgently and fervently to pursue diplomacy aimed at getting the parties to stop fighting, move a settlement of their outstanding disputes to a political track.
But as Ethiopia enters the new year, analysts and diplomats alike warn that the trend lines are going in the wrong direction. Margaret Bashir, VOA News, the United Nations.
So armed forces from Ethiopia's Amhara region are stepping up killings, mass detentions and expulsions of ethnic Tigrayans in neighboring western Tigray. That's according to Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. Now, for the latest developments in Ethiopia, I'm joined live via Skype by VOA UN correspondent Margaret Bashir. Hello, Margaret.
Hi, Vincent. Good to be with you.
Thank you. And now you've summed up things so well, but want to look at, the fact that actually this conflict in Ethiopia has created a major food crisis also. What more can you tell us about the delivery of food aid to those who are needy?
Yeah, it's a terrible situation. The United Nations has been working for months to try and get more aid into northern Ethiopia, particularly into Tigray. There are more than 5 million people in desperate need there. And, the conflict has spilled over since about June into Amhara and into Afar. And now the numbers are really skyrocketing, particularly in Amhara. I think 3.7 million people are in need of aid there. And it's not going well. And the United Nations has had problems both with the government of Ethiopia, the federal government, and with the TPLF. Recently, in the last 10 days or so, they've had aid trucks from the World Food Program stolen, taken away by what the UN believes are federal government forces or groups aligned with them, and they've had their warehouses looted by what they believe are the TPLF. So it's been very difficult, and they're not getting nearly enough aid in.
Really sad. And there's going to be a discussion in Geneva by the UN Human Rights Commission. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Right. So you may recall in early November, there was a report between the UN Human Rights Commission and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. They did a joint report on the situation in Tigray, and they said that there were abuses, human rights violations committed by all parties. And now the European Union in Geneva at the UN Human Rights Council has asked for a special session tomorrow, and it's to discuss the human rights abuses, which are ongoing. The dual report that the Ethiopians and the UN did ended in June, but the crisis is continuing and the abuses are continuing. So they need to, what they want to do is vote a resolution to mandate a commission that would have a mandate for about a year that could be renewed later. And they would begin to investigate, to report, and to collect evidence. And it would be used later in prosecutions and to hold people accountable for these atrocities. I mean, we've heard about terrible stories of sexual violence and rape throughout this, torture, killings. I mean, really heartbreaking stories from people who have escaped and survived. So this is what they want. But interestingly, it is quite a controversial meeting. The African countries on the Human Rights Council don't want it, and they didn't vote for the meeting. But there are enough members of this 47-member committee to have this meeting on Friday.
We're definitely going to be listening to see what comes out of this meeting. Our thanks to VOA UN correspondent Margaret Bashir, reporting live via Skype. Now, South Africa's High Court has ordered former President Jacob Zuma to return to jail after setting aside an earlier decision to release him on medical parole. Soraya Ali has the latest.
South Africa's High Court ordered former President Jacob Zuma to return to jail on Wednesday, setting aside an earlier decision to release him on medical parole. The 79-year-old began medical parole in September and is serving a 15-month sentence for contempt of court after he ignored instructions to participate in a corruption inquiry. In the same month, South Africa's top court dismissed a bid by Zuma to overturn the sentence. Ulrich Roo is a South African lawyer.
Any person is capable of or able to apply for medical parole. But the requirements to be released on medical parole must be met. And if I can just read this one sentence from the judgment, the Medical Parole Review Board found that Jacob Zuma is not suffering from a terminal disease or condition.
Zuma is facing charges of alleged corruption during his 9-year reign. It's widely viewed as a test of post-apartheid South Africa's ability to enforce the rule of law, particularly against powerful, well-connected people. Zuma handed himself in on July 7th to begin his prison sentence. That triggered the worst violence South Africa had seen in years as his angry supporters took to the streets. The protests widened into looting and an outpouring of anger over the hardship and inequality in South Africa. More than 300 people were killed and thousands of businesses were pillaged and razed. Zuma's legal team are appealing the latest court ruling, as is the country's prison department. He denies wrongdoing in all cases and says he is the victim of a political witch hunt meant to marginalize his faction within the ruling African National Congress.
That's Soraya Ali of Reuters reporting there. Authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo Thursday have declared the end of an Ebola outbreak that emerged in early October in North Kivu province and infected 11 people, killing 6. Congo declared its 13th outbreak of the disease on October the 8th in Beni, prompting fears of a repeat of a 2018-2020 epidemic that killed nearly 2,300 people in the same region, the second highest toll recorded in the disease's history. The virus, which causes severe vomiting and diarrhea and is spread through contact with body fluid, was first discovered near the Ebola River in 1976. Israel says it is donating 1 million coronavirus vaccines to the United Nations-backed COVAX program. The foreign ministry says the AstraZeneca vaccines are to be transferred in the coming weeks, a decision that is part of Israel's plan to strengthen its ties with Africa. The announcement says the vaccines will reach close to 25% of African countries, although no list was provided. Israel has close ties with a number of African nations, including Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. Israel also established relations with Sudan last year as part of a series of U.S. brokered accords. COVAX is a global initiative that aims to provide coronavirus vaccines to poorer nations. The disfiguring disease, Noma, is found mainly in poor areas of sub-Saharan Africa that lack health care and kills 90% of victims left untreated, most of them children. Noma is preventable with awareness, and aid groups are urging the World Health Organization to add Noma to its list of neglected tropical diseases. Henry Wilkins reports from Kongusi, Burkina Faso.
8-year-old Amadou Compore recently recovered from Noma, a little-known tropical disease that kills 9/10 of its victims if left untreated. Many who survive Noma have facial disfigurement. Although Noma has scarred his face, Amadou, relatively speaking, is one of the lucky ones. If Noma is diagnosed within the first few weeks of infection, it's easily treatable with a course of antibiotics.
We noticed the disease in the run-up to Christmas. To begin with, he said his mouth ached to the point where he couldn't eat anymore. He even had great difficulty drinking sachets of water.
Compore took his son to the nearest city, Kaya, about 25 kilometres away, where medical staff could identify the disease thanks to awareness building by the Swiss non-governmental organisation Sentinels. Sidi Omar Boena is a nurse at the Sentinels Medical Centre in Ouagadougou, specialising in the treatment of Noma.
In most of Burkina Faso, health workers have no idea about the disease Noma, so diagnosing it in people 400 to 500 kilometres from Ouagadougou is very difficult.
He says that he's sometimes forced to diagnose Noma with photos sent to him via WhatsApp. Odette Serene, who also suffered from Noma, now receives regular follow-up treatment at the Sentinels clinic, including support in finding a job.
I am a tailor. There are people who laugh at me. When they laugh at me, it makes me sad, but the nurse has helped a lot to take care of me.
Noma is just one of many illnesses that are currently missing from the World Health Organization's list of neglected tropical diseases. Doctors Without Borders, a medical NGO, is running a campaign to have Noma added to the WHO list, which already includes diseases like rabies and dengue fever.
At community level, because there is, of course, discrimination affecting the patients, and so every time there is a case, we might not even be aware because they are hidden by the communities or they are dying. More than 90% of people are estimated to die.
The WHO says when it adds diseases to the list, factors like social stigma and death rates are taken into consideration. But resources are limited, so some diseases have to be left off. WHO press officer Ashok Molu explains the effect of adding a disease to the list.
It really brings the disease or the condition to another level. If it is category A, then a global program is built around the disease to tackle the disease. It also adds to the advocacy part of the disease, awareness creation, and also resources.
As for Amadou Compore, he says what the doctors have done to help him has been an inspiration.
I want to become a doctor, to treat people, so that they will be cured.
The WHO plans to make possible new additions to its neglected tropical diseases list in 2023. It remains to be seen if Noma will be among them. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Kongusi, Burkina Faso.
Still to come, a South Sudanese woman is making a name for herself through her paintings and illustrations. We'll be right back.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Istanbul hosts a two-day African summit starting on Friday. It is the latest effort by Turkey to expand its diplomatic and economic influence in Africa. Dorian Jones has this review.
After a two-year delay caused by the COVID pandemic, Istanbul begins hosting the Turkey-Africa Partnership Summit on Friday. But with the Omicron variant spreading hours before the start, it remained unclear who would attend. The summit is part of an effort that has seen Turkey opening 30 new embassies while pushing an aggressive trade policy.
The Turks are also very convincing because they work fast. They offer construction projects at relatively affordable prices. They adapt to the culture.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is a regular visitor to Africa, visiting the continent 28 times since 2003. But Turkey's ambitions are creating points of friction, stoking rivalries with France, a former colonial power in much of the continent. And in the Libyan conflict, it backed the side opposed to the faction supported by Egypt. A rivalry that has led to Turkish businesses complaining they've been forced out of the lucrative Egyptian market.
In Egypt, there is a quite good textile industry there, and also automotive and other types of industries where we can, find ourselves very comfortable in this industrial environment there. Also technical people. So Egypt has been a loss for us.
Turkish and Egyptian diplomats have been holding talks to improve ties, and those talks may continue on the sidelines of the Istanbul summit. There will also be discussions on trade. Ankara touts the recent sale of military drones to Morocco as an important breakthrough for the Turkish defense industry. State figures show Turkey's trade with Africa has increased fivefold to $25 billion since 2003, much less than China's. For Erdogan, it pays huge political dividends at home.
The government can portray itself to its voters as being a global player or supporting the friendly government, like Muslim states, for instance, Somalia in Africa. So it is very much appreciated, in fact, in Turkish public, Turkey's engagement in Africa.
With the Turkish economy hit by a currency crisis, Erdogan will welcome any boost the summit can bring. Dorian Jones, VOA News, Istanbul.
U.S. President Joe Biden came into office with the message, America is back. And he promised that diplomacy would replace military power as the main instrument of U.S. foreign policy. VOA White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara has this recap of President Biden's policies abroad during his first year in office.
It's been quite a year in U.S. foreign policy, with the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan in August widely seen as the biggest failure of President Joe Biden's first year in office.
Terrorism has intensified, and the Taliban takeover has led to sanctions that have put Afghanistan in a position where it has an acute humanitarian crisis that could well lead to mass famine. And I think that this very precipitate, chaotic U.S. withdrawal is seen as linked to those outcomes.
The withdrawal is in line with the administration's goal to decrease military engagement in the Middle East. But challenges remain, including existing tensions between Israelis and Palestinians and the stalled effort to rescue the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, the 2015 Iran nuclear deal with world powers that the Trump administration withdrew from in 2018. Still, following years of America First under former President Donald Trump, Biden's message is that America is back.
We'll stand up for our allies and our friends and oppose attempts by stronger countries to dominate weaker ones, whether through changes to territory by force, economic coercion, technical exploitation, or disinformation. But we're not seeking, say it again, we are not seeking a new Cold War or a world divided into rigid blocs.
But Biden has drawn fault lines, what he calls the struggle between democracies and autocracies. He rallied more than 100 countries at a virtual summit for democracy in December, excluding Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin, whom he met virtually on separate occasions, reinforcing a key theme in his foreign policy doctrine.
Global cooperation around complex issues like the environment and pandemics that require cooperation with China, that require cooperation with Russia. But on the other hand, also trying to keep on this theme of the United States will cooperate with democracies. The United States is a democratic nation, and the United States does see an authoritarian challenge as a significant challenge.
China, now a major adversary in military might and geopolitical influence, is Biden's foreign policy priority. But Russia, another rival, is not staying on the sidelines, mobilizing tens of thousands of troops along the Ukrainian border.
Russia is not a solved problem. It's still a major actor that has interests that are divergent with the United States and our European allies. And so it really can't be put in a box. I think what we're seeing here is some behavior from the Russian Federation to remind the United States that it's still there, it still has interests that it wants to pursue, and that those interests can't be ignored.
Another unsolved problem is North Korea, where the administration is unwilling to cut a deal unless Kim Jong-un commits to winding down his nuclear weapons program. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
South Sudanese artist Abul Oyai Deng is making a name for herself, painting women and illustrating other themes through her artwork. Abul, who is also a curator, wants to promote upcoming artists, especially women painters from across the region. Clara Frank has more.
Abul Oyai Deng Ejak is a painter, curator, and artist focused on female expression, based in Juba, South Sudan. Abul was born in Ethiopia in 1986. When war erupted there, she was separated from her mother and came to South Sudan with her paternal grandmother, who was a big influence on her. She says women, therefore, are a constant theme in her body of work.
I was raised by women, especially growing up, of course, we know the old story of South Sudan. All the men were in the battlefield. And so at the time, my father was never with us, you know. It's a subconscious thing, and I've been raised by very strong women.
Abul attended university in London, where she explored her skills further. Her first exhibition took place in Juba after South Sudan declared independence in 2011. Full and equal representation of women in politics and decision-making is an issue close to her heart. She not only wants to showcase her work, but also mentor upcoming artists, especially women painters from across the region.
As artists, we are storytellers, we are anthropologists. 50 years from now, looking at all the artworks you see here, they will be telling the story of the time we've lived.
Clara Frank, Washington.
Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us in Washington, thanks for watching.